Sometimes life becomes so busy that we forget to pause and ask, am I truly living or just passing through my days? We spend a lot of time thinking about success, plans, and the future. But we rarely sit quietly with questions like, what does death really mean to me? Why do I sometimes feel alone, even among others? And am I truly responsible for the life I am living? In this episode, I want us to slow down and reflect on these questions together. Not to find perfect answers, but to build the courage to face them through the ideas of Irvin Yalom. Hello, I'm Saber, and you're listening to another episode of the Failure Chronicles podcast. Today, I'm here with you for a very exciting and deep journey. A journey into our inner world. Into the big questions that sometimes keep us awake at night, or maybe questions we have never even dared to think about. Questions like, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Why do I feel alone? Should we be afraid of death or not? Some of us ask ourselves these questions. And sometimes we try to avoid them because they feel scary. But there is someone who has spent many years of his life helping people face these questions without fear. That person is none other than Irvin Yalom. Before we go further, I feel it's important to explain again why I chose this topic. First of all, I chose Irvin Yalom because he is one of the main developers of existential psychology, which addresses many of the big questions we just mentioned. And most importantly, he talks a lot about suffering, something we have discussed many times in this program. In my opinion, understanding Yalom's ideas can really help us think more clearly about suffering. So, who is Irvin Yalom? Yalom is an exceptional writer. Through his stories, he makes complex philosophical and psychological ideas understandable for ordinary people like us. It's as if he built a bridge between heavy philosophical books and the real feelings of everyday life. When you read his books, you are learning, reading a story, thinking deeply, and feeling emotionally, all at the same time. It's truly a complete experience. Yalom is an existential psychotherapist. Yalom believes many of our psychological struggles come from four main concerns of life: loneliness, meaninglessness, death, and freedom. His goal is to help us face these concerns, not escape from them. Now let's take a look at Yalom's own life and see how he became who he is. Irvin Yalom was born on June 13, 1931, in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States. His parents were Jewish immigrants from Russia. About 15 years before his birth, they had immigrated from Belarus to America. Eventually, they opened a small grocery store in Washington. Yalom says he grew up in a poor neighborhood that was mostly Jewish. The 1930s were a time of deep economic depression in America. Then, in the 1940s, World War II began and ended with millions of deaths and terrible tragedies, especially for Jewish people. Remember this, Irvin Yalom was a poor Jewish immigrant child growing up in a poor Jewish neighborhood, during a time of economic crisis and global war. Of course, these conditions must have deeply influenced his thinking and his experience of life. But from early childhood, Yalom had one safe place: books. Books were his refuge and his constant companion. He spent hours and hours in the public library of his neighborhood, completely immersed in reading. This early love for books later shaped both his writing style and even his way of doing therapy. If you have read his books, you know how beautifully he tells stories. Yalom studied hard. In 1952, he received his bachelor's degree from George Washington University. After that, he studied medicine and earned his medical degree in 1956 from Boston University School of Medicine. He did his internship at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and then completed his psychiatric residency at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. After 2 years of military service at Tripler General Hospital in Hawaii, he began his academic career. In 1963, he joined Stanford University as a professor and remained there until his retirement in 1994. In fact, he spent his entire professional career at Stanford and became a full professor in 1968. At Stanford, Yalom did important work, especially in teaching group psychotherapy and developing his own model of existential psychotherapy. His major book, Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy, published in 1970, became a key reference in the field. It was even named one of the 10 most influential psychiatric publications of that decade. His wife, Marilyn Yalom, was also a respected writer and historian. They lived together for many years until Marilyn passed away in 2019. Her death had a deep emotional impact on Yalom. After her passing, he published a book with her titled A Matter of Death and Life. Even though Yalom is officially retired, he still sees patients in his office. Now that we know more about his life, let's look at the thinkers and ideas that shaped Yalom. Yalom has often said that his work is deeply rooted in existential philosophy. His interest in philosophy began during his residency years. If you ask him who influenced him the most, he would probably say Friedrich Nietzsche. In his famous novel When Nietzsche Wept, which I previously summarized for you, Yalom explores Nietzsche's ideas in depth. Nietzsche believed that we should accept life fully, with all its beauty and all its suffering, just as it is. He argued that we must create ourselves and give meaning to our own lives. From Nietzsche, Yalom learned how to face life's challenges with courage and move beyond existential despair. Soren Kierkegaard is often called the father of existentialism. He emphasized the inner and personal experience of each individual. He believed we must face anxiety and the big choices in our lives, and take responsibility for them. These ideas are very present in Yalom's work. Martin Heidegger, a German philosopher, focused on the idea of being in the world. He said that we are thrown into this world without choosing it, and we find ourselves in a world full of meanings and possibilities. Heidegger also spoke deeply about the inevitability of death. These ideas helped Yalom develop a deeper understanding of existential challenges. Jean-Paul Sartre also had a strong influence on Yalom. Sartre emphasized absolute freedom and human responsibility. His famous statement is, "Existence precedes essence." What does that mean? It means we first exist, we are born, and only later define ourselves through our choices and actions. But this freedom also brings a heavy burden of responsibility. Yalom's therapy strongly focuses on this freedom and responsibility. Yalom also paid attention to major psychoanalysts, but with a critical perspective. He appreciated Sigmund Freud for showing how much the unconscious mind influences our behavior and experiences. However, he strongly disagreed with Freud's deterministic model, the idea that everything is already determined by instincts and past forces. Yalom believed Freud underestimated the existential dimensions of human life. Yalom felt closer to Carl Jung. Jung supported a more humanistic and meaning-centered approach to therapy. Yalom appreciated Jung's ideas about archetypes and the collective unconscious. Yalom also valued the basic human need for belonging and social connection, something Alfred Adler talked about a lot. However, although Adler believed that the feeling of inferiority is the main driver of our behavior, Yalom disagreed with that idea. He saw it as too reductionist, too simple for something as complex as human life. In general, Yalom learned something from each of these thinkers, but he never limited himself to just one school of thought. He managed to bring philosophy directly into psychotherapy, and that was a major innovation. He often said, "We must take the here and now seriously in the therapeutic relationship." In other words, the very moment when therapist and patient sit together is itself a powerful healing factor. Yalom is truly a complete writer. He has written professional books for psychotherapists and also novels that have attracted readers all around the world. He once said that after writing textbooks, he realized he could teach his ideas better by presenting them in the form of stories. Among his well-known books are Theory and Practice of Group Psychotherapy, Existential Psychotherapy, The Gift of Therapy, Staring at the Sun, Overcoming the Terror of Death, A Matter of Death and Life, and many others. But Yalom is especially famous for his novels. He believes that literature and storytelling can show us the emptiness and contradictions of life much better than dry philosophical arguments. When Nietzsche Wept was his first novel, and it became a bestseller. It tells the fictional story of a meeting between Friedrich Nietzsche and Joseph Breuer, who was one of Freud's teachers. The story is very engaging, and at the same time, it teaches many philosophical and psychological lessons. Another famous book of his is Love's Executioner and Other Tales of Psychotherapy. This book is a collection of real stories from Yalom's therapy sessions. Yalom says he did not originally write it for the general public, but the response was so strong that even he was surprised. This book shows us what happens behind closed doors in the therapy room, and how deep wounds can be discovered and healed there. Now, we have repeated the word existentialism many times. Let's finally talk about it. What does this big and complicated word actually mean? Don't worry, I'm not going to make it complicated. Let's understand it together, in a simple way, even if you have never read philosophy before. Existentialism comes from the word existence, which means to exist or to be. Imagine you are in a dark room. You can't see anything. Then suddenly, the light turns on, and you realize you are alone in the room. Existentialism says that we humans are like that. First, we come into the world. First, we exist. It's like the light turns on. We come from non-existence into existence. And only after that do we begin to build ourselves and search for meaning in our lives. No one has already decided who you must be or what your life must mean. You have to create that yourself. Now let's talk about some main concepts of existentialism in very simple language. First concept, existence precedes essence. This means that you are the creator of yourself. Think about a chair. First, someone designs it. They decide what it is for sitting. Its essence, its purpose, is already defined before it is built. But we humans are not like that. We are firstborn. We exist without a fixed purpose. Then, through our actions and choices, we slowly define who we are. If today you choose to help someone, you define yourself as a kind person. If you choose to be lazy, you define yourself as a lazy person. The responsibility is yours. This means you cannot blame someone else for who you have become. You built yourself. Second concept, freedom and responsibility. Because no one has already defined our essence, we are completely free. We are free to choose our path. I know this idea can be challenging, especially when we talk about free will and determinism. But for now, let's assume that we are free. If we are truly free, then we are also fully responsible for our choices. Even if we refuse to choose, that is still a choice, and we are responsible for its consequences. We cannot say, "It was fate," or "society made me this way." This freedom and responsibility can create anxiety. This is called the anxiety of freedom. Third concept, meaninglessness, or what we sometimes call emptiness. But existentialists do not say that life must stay meaningless. They say that life has no given meaning, but we must create meaning ourselves. We are thrown into existence, but what happens next depends on us. We can create meaning through love, friendship, work, creativity, helping others, or anything that feels valuable to us. The key point is not to stay passive. We must take action. If life does not come with a ready-made meaning, then sometimes we may feel that life is meaningless. For example, when something bad happens to a good person, and we cannot find any logical reason for it. The world is not necessarily fair, and it does not automatically give us meaning. Fourth concept, existential anxiety. This is the deep anxiety we feel when we face our absolute freedom and heavy responsibility. It's like standing at the edge of a cliff. You are afraid of falling, but you are also afraid because you know you could choose to jump. This anxiety is not like the fear of a dog or a snake. It does not come from an external object. It comes from inside us. It comes from knowing that no external force is stopping us. Everything is in our hands. And that makes us anxious. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I make a mistake? What will happen? What will be the consequences? Fifth concept, existential loneliness. This is different from social loneliness. It does not mean you are physically alone or that you have no friends or family. This loneliness also comes from inside, not from outside. It is deeper. Even when you are surrounded by people, even when you have many friends, you may still feel that, in the end, you entered this world alone, and you will leave it alone. No one can fully understand your inner world. No one can live your life for you. No one can die in your place. Yalom calls this an unbridgeable gap between oneself and any other being. Sixth concept, authenticity, or being your true self. Again, all of this is based on the assumptions of existentialism. If we accept these ideas, then living authentically means being yourself in this world of freedom and responsibility. It means living according to your real values. It means not acting a role, not pretending. Every choice you make is yours, and you take responsibility for it. But if you always try to adjust yourself only to meet others' expectations, or you keep saying, "I had no choice," then you are escaping from your freedom. And that means you are not living authentically. In summary, existentialism says that life may be difficult. It may be full of choices and responsibilities. The universe may not have a ready-made meaning. But exactly because of that, we are free. We can build our own lives and give them meaning. This philosophy gives us the courage to face the hard truths of life and to use them as a path for growth and maturity. Now that we have a basic understanding of existentialism, let's see how Yalom uses these ideas in psychotherapy. He believes that four ultimate concerns are at the core of his work. The first is facing death, or the fear of death. Yalom says, death is the wake-up call of life. What does that mean? It means that knowing we will die one day can push us to think seriously about how we are living right now. Many people try to avoid thinking about death. They act as if, by ignoring it, they can escape it. But Yalom says that this denial actually prevents us from fully enjoying life. So how do we face the fear of death? First, we must accept that death is a natural fact. It will happen, whether we like it or not. Accepting death does not mean giving up. It means being realistic. When we accept it, we can deal with it more peacefully instead of constantly running away from it. Once we accept that our time is limited, we try harder to do things that truly matter to us. We build meaningful relationships. We become more creative. We help others. When we feel that we have lived well, we are less afraid of life ending. Yalom also says that much of our fear of death comes from unfinished business. These are the things we wanted to do but never did. The words we wanted to say but never said. If we resolve these unfinished matters by forgiving, apologizing, or following our dreams, we feel a deep sense of satisfaction, and our fear of death becomes smaller. Another important focus in Yalom's therapy is living in the present moment. When we truly focus on the here and now and learn to enjoy it, we worry less about the future and about death. Another major concern for Yalom is loneliness and how we deal with it. He says there is ordinary loneliness, like not having friends. But there is also existential loneliness, which we talked about before. Existential loneliness means that, in the end, we enter this world alone and we leave it alone. No one can fully understand what is happening inside our mind and heart. Yalom believes this is a deep and sometimes frightening truth. So how do we face existential loneliness? Just like death, the first step is acceptance. We must accept that this loneliness is part of being human. This does not mean becoming isolated. It means understanding something deeper about life. Even though we are ultimately alone, we still need relationships. Yalom emphasizes that our relationships must be real and honest, not superficial. In a real relationship, we show who we truly are, and we accept the other person as they truly are. Another important issue for Yalom is self-knowledge. When we learn to live with existential loneliness, we become stronger. This loneliness becomes an opportunity to know ourselves better and to discover our inner resources. Then we move toward finding meaning within ourselves. When meaning comes from inside, we depend less on others to fill our emotional emptiness. Another central concern in Yalom's work is meaninglessness and the search for meaning. As we said before, the world does not come with a ready-made meaning. If that is true, then what is the meaning of life? Yalom says, the world itself is meaningless, but we human beings can give it meaning. In other words, the meaning of life is not written in a book somewhere. Each of us must find it or create it. We can create meaning through creating something, painting, making music, doing scientific work, building good relationships, love, friendship, family, enjoying life, appreciating nature, listening to beautiful music, helping society, volunteering, taking part in social activities, self-actualization, using our talents and abilities to become the best version of ourselves. Yalom says that if someone says, "I find no meaning in my life," we should look deeper. Maybe underneath that feeling there is fear of death. Maybe the person is escaping from freedom. Maybe they are afraid of loneliness. When these inner obstacles are removed, the person naturally moves toward creating meaning. Another key concept Yalom emphasizes is freedom and responsibility. He calls it a double-edged sword. Freedom is a great gift. We can choose who we want to be and what path we want to follow. But the other side of freedom is heavy responsibility. If we are free, then no one but us is responsible for the consequences of our choices. Yalom says, we are the authors of our own lives. Even not choosing is a choice, and we are responsible for it. So why are we afraid of freedom and responsibility? One common reaction is blaming others. We say, "My parents made me like this," or "society forced me." Another reaction is avoiding decisions. We let others decide for us, or we keep postponing choices. Another example is perfectionism. we try to do everything perfectly so we won't make mistakes and won't have to face responsibility. From Yalom's point of view, how should we deal with freedom and responsibility? First, we must accept responsibility. Recognizing that we are responsible for our lives is the first step toward growth. This acceptance gives us power to change our lives. Second, we must change our perspective. Instead of seeing responsibility as a heavy burden, we can see it as an opportunity to build the kind of life we truly want. Third, we should make conscious choices. Before choosing, we think about the consequences and decide with awareness. Fourth, we need courage in choosing. We should not be afraid of making mistakes. Every mistake is a chance to learn. Even failure gives us new experience and new understanding. And finally, we should live according to our values. When we live based on our own values, our choices become more meaningful, and we accept responsibility more easily. Yalom reminds us that the ability to choose is life's greatest gift. By accepting responsibility for this gift, we can build a rich and meaningful life. As you can see, Yalom looks at life in a very deep but also very practical way. His influence is not only on psychology, but on each of us. He helped establish existential psychotherapy and showed how philosophy can be used in real therapy. His emphasis on the therapist-patient relationship, the here and now, changed many therapists. Perhaps his greatest achievement is that he made complex philosophical and psychological ideas understandable for ordinary people like us. Through his teaching novels, millions of readers have faced the big questions of life without fear. He helped us understand ourselves better, why we sometimes feel anxious or lonely, and how we can deal with these feelings. In the end, Yalom's message is this: life is hard. It is full of challenges and big questions. But if we have the courage to face these challenges, if we take responsibility for our lives and create our own meaning, then we can live a deeper, richer, and more authentic life, a life that truly belongs to us. Of course, I also accept the criticisms about determinism. I know that many events in life are outside our control. Many things are imposed on us. But I believe the main message of Yalom and other existential thinkers is this: how do we look at this determinism, at suffering, at poverty, at injustice, at our problems? How do we continue living alongside these realities in a way that reduces our suffering as much as possible? In this episode, I tried to introduce you briefly to existentialist ideas, especially the thoughts of Irvin Yalom. This was only a small drop from the vast ocean of human thought, based on my limited knowledge and general information available. I hope it has sparked your curiosity. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this episode. I hope this podcast has been useful for you. If you liked it, please share it with your friends. I would be happy to read your comments and criticisms. Until the next episode, take care and goodbye.